Hello everyone and welcome to the 2023 David Hancock channel action photo portion critique. What we're going to do is I've got the names, so if you just want to skip to yours, it's going to be this way for all the videos. Just check the names down at the bottom. Then the honorable mentions will come after that, and each category will have 3 honorable mentions followed by second and first. And then everything up to the honorable mentions is just thrown in randomly, and we're just going to talk about them. So we're going to start here with a photo from Trevor Duff. And Trevor has a picture of a skateboarder over on the sidewalk. Looks like there's some groomed beach or some groomed sand, and then the palm trees in the sky. So the things that are working well here, like the general framing, composition, the technical aspects of this are all in good shape. It is an action shot in that there is action going on with the skateboarder. But we could beg the question of, is it captivating action or is it too far away? I think those would be the 2 questions to ask. So if we had the opportunity to recreate this image exactly as we wanted, as we saw fit, and by the way, huge asterisk, action photos out in the wild can be really hard to get. The opportunities rarely present themselves really well. But if we had the opportunity to go back in time and change our placement, imagine having this photo with the photographer, with Trevor standing underneath that lamppost at the left. So then in the background would be the sand, and I would assume a lake or beach or something behind. The point of that game of what if is to look at what is it that would change the composition to make it a more engaging action shot. And the answer to that would be having the skateboarder facing the camera and moving toward it, right? Because if the photographer was anywhere between, say, that corner of the sidewalk where those 2 sidewalks meet and then the lamppost, that's how that would change that. So the idea with the action shot in general is to look at, if you can get it, is to get a scene that is one that would be really heart-pounding for somebody if they were there in real life. Okay. And by the way, like I said, everyone struggled in this category. That's a really hard thing to do. Our next shot comes from Antonio King, and this was one I really struggled with because there is clearly action going on here. We've got waves breaking against some large rocks that are really pretty well hidden by it. And oh, by the way, really striking photo. And we've got the bird over on the right that's a bit out of focus, maybe just because it's behind the spray. But the question that I kept coming back to is it an action shot or is it a landscape photo where there's a lot of really rough weather and seas? I still really wish I'd taken this photo. It's really, frankly, exceptionally good. But the question that I struggled with was, does it fulfill the prompt of being an action shot? Now, if there was a surfer down on that close wave, then clearly yes. Really don't think this is the kind of weather people want to surf in, but anyway, as an action shot, I'm not sure that it fulfills the prompt, but as a general photograph, it is really exceptionally well executed. Our next photo comes from Mukul, and this shot is a picture of an airplane flying overhead. And as we talked about with Trevor's photo, this one suffers from a similar thing of just being far away from the action. So you can definitely get an action shot of an airplane. If you've ever seen photos of airplanes at, say, an airplane show, right, where they intentionally fly low and give you the opportunity to get photos of them, that's a way to get an action shot of an airplane. Because one of the things that we talked about before, we'll talk about again here, is a really successful action shot arises when the viewer is put into a position that they may not be able to be in, at least not safely, in real life. So yes, there is action going on, but I think that when we get to, say, the honorable mentions, I think you'll see that there's the takes on the action shot there were a little bit different. And by the way, I want to stress again, nobody should feel badly about their photos in this. This was an unexpectedly hard category. So from Richard Mengle, we have a shot of llama, donkey, looks like a farm animal sticking its nose through the fence that it, or the wire, open wire wall that it's on the other side of. So cute photo, a little bit distracted by the teeth. I know that, like, that's, I gotta imagine that's pretty much just normal for them. But at any rate, this is another one of the things where we'll see a recurring theme throughout, where the action is more kind of a static shot, right? And so does the photo scream action? No, because there's not a whole lot of, because it's not freezing an obvious motion, right? It's not capturing an obvious, like, action-y type thing that the animal is doing. So other than sticking its nose out to smile or something like that. Cute photo, but yeah. Our next shot here comes from Ken Andersson, and here we have a photo of a kid walking up to open a door. So freezing action, we've got a little bit of the motion blur in the kid's left foot, a little bit in the left hand. Looks like he's probably on a ship or in a building next to an ocean or something like that. So walking up to, actually, I guess just go through the door. So far, this is the most action-shotty action shot that we've looked at, in the way that it has a subject who is doing a thing kind of facing the camera, at least kind of like body pointed in the direction. And we can see also the action that subject is flowing into, which is to walk through the doorway. So to that end, fulfilled the prompt. One other thing I would say is that the use of lighting, shadow, and darkness in this is pretty well done. I really do like the way that the light being shown in through, or, coming in through the window, and it is amplifying the action by pointing in the same direction as the direction of the kid who's walking. So whether that was intentional or not, I'm not sure, but it was a good result. Next up, from Luca Pasini, we have a photo of a carnival ride. It's a little bit hard to see here because this is after dark, and so the exposure is a little bit long. But this is one of those raised swing rides where you strap in and then you swing around and trust. So actually, these are really fun rides. I'm not going to lie. I loved these growing up. Anyway, what we have is the action of that. We have the blurring of the swings just a little bit. This is probably somewhere in the vicinity of a 30th of a second exposure, which is long for action, but capturing that blurry motion is okay in this context, especially at night. And then also, because of the length of the exposure, you get a little bit of motion in the crowd as well. So realistically, there's one of the things that this is doing well is that it is showing the motion and the movement in the two things within this that are moving, the swings and the crowd. And then the use of light and dark is also pretty nicely done. Overall, just a pleasant execution and a good composition for this, right? Because over on the left, we have the shape of the base of the carnival ride. Really, I think the use of lines here, by the way, intentional or not, very striking. Like the horizontals are horizontal, the diagonals are like they should be, the verticals are vertical. So everything, all of that is just lining up. And then that big shape over on the left also guides the viewer's eyes over toward the action of the swings. So again, really well done from a compositional standpoint as well. Next up, from Milan Cetic, we have a picture of somebody walking past a gravestone and looking at and away from the camera as they go. And so this is an interesting take on the action prompt because it doesn't freeze motion, right? And we've seen this a couple of times where the motion's not like frozen. And that's okay, because what Milan is doing here is capturing the motion of the person walking past. And also, I think that the way that the person's face and clothes blurred together on this photo really creates a nice effect. So if we could go back and look at this from other, like how could we potentially play what if with this photo? Imagine rotating 90 degrees to your right or counterclockwise. And what would happen if we didn't quite get the text from the gravestone, because that could be a distracting element, into the photo, but we got a little bit more of the kneeling angel, and then we started to cut out a bit of the wire mesh fence in the background. Or conversely, we went and tried this, if we could freeze time and go back and rearrange things and do this with a clockwise turn so that we're behind the angel and the grave site, and then there's no text to worry about, and then the person moving like that, say between the two gravestones, with the angel facing away, could also be another really interesting execution of this. So really like the idea here. The only thing that really stands out is that you have this very smooth and blurry person, and also this very smooth stone and the very smooth angel carving, and then a very not busy is not the right word, but a background with a lot of detail in it. And so it ends up the background, the brambles and the fence behind the gravestone end up becoming a distracting element from the rest of the image composition. And so this comes from Gemista. I believe that's Peter's username. Anyway, this photo is of, nope, not, that's the other hockey photo. Just a sec. Here it is. Okay, so this is a photo of, looks like the Philly Flyers, I'm guessing by the colors, and not sure who's in black. Or is it, I think Phillies. No, Pittsburgh. Is it? I don't remember. It's been 30 years if it's been, it's been 20 years if it's been a day since I saw a hockey game. So at any rate, so this is a photo of a hockey game. And we have a bit of action. So indoor sports, very hard to photograph. Even a hockey arena, which has a big white reflective surface underneath it, which is about as good an indoor lighting situation as you can get for sports photography, still really hard to photograph. So we can see from the image here that this is probably a bit of a crop and also a faster film. Not quite sure which film it's got. I'm going to guess it's probably a Kodak film, like an Ultramax 400. No, it doesn't look like Portra 800. That's my best guess. At any rate, even when you're talking about a 400 or an 800 speed film indoor, unless you've got a really fast lens, then the shutter speed's going to be a little bit slow. So with the position of the photographer here, which is going to be up in the seats, probably a handful of rows back, maybe a bit more than that, to get a photo with this composition would take a longer focal length. It's kind of hard to tell with the players. I'm trying to judge by their relative heights. If you look at the three yellow players in the middle, you can see that they're all kind of about the same height. Now, if you imagine that this photo is taken on the ice right between that black and the yellow player who are dueling it out over the puck with like a 20 millimeter lens, those two yellow players in the back would be really, really small and would seem very far away. But because of telephoto compression, if you're further away and you're using something like, let's say, a 200 millimeter lens, then those two players in the background are going to appear to be, squished forward. Like the magnification of those players on your image is going to be significantly less, because the ratio between focal length and subject height and distance, it's a much different proposition at 200 or 500 millimeters versus 20 or 35, something like that, right? So what we can glean from this is probably a longer lens. I don't know, maybe like in the 135 range, best guess. At any rate, something like that could be really good for photos from somewhere back in the grandstands. The only suggestion I would have here would be to imagine if, and noting that hockey tickets aren't cheap, well, no sporting event tickets are cheap. This is why I haven't photographed any of the rodeos in the last few years. Anyway, if you could imagine sitting like right behind or as close as you could to the plexiglass along the rink, and then having that same lens, then that would allow the subject there to fill up much more of the frame. So, but given that where the seat probably was, the lighting and the equipment. This was probably as good an execution as any of us would have been able to do of this scene. So I think it's a neat shot. Next up, from Rich Mander, we have an action shot on a beach, and we have looks like some kids playing and having fun. Oh, sorry, shouldn't say kids. They look like they're in their 30s, late 20s, early 30s, playing and having fun, maybe skipping stones or something like that. Hard to say for sure. So the two things here, you'll hear this again, as we've said before. If you imagine going back in time and with this frozen motion, which, by the way, the motion is frozen very well here, in terms of like there's no motion blur or anything like that. Not even in what looks like the girl is like throwing something or dropping something, and there's not even any motion blur in her fingers or the thing that's in her hand. So good, fast shutter speed here. Now, if you imagine going back in time with time being frozen and going around clockwise until you were, instead of forming imagine the photographer and the three people in this, and you imagine them from above. They're forming a diamond right now. Now move that photographer around so that they form a square, and the photographer's pointing in at the three people. And if you can get like all three of them in the frame, let's say, then that would be a different way to think about the composition here, because then you'd have engagement with the person who's currently on the left and the camera, and then between the two people who are currently the ones on the right and the person who's doing the action on the left. So this is, when you're in the moment, you're getting a photo as quickly as you can. You got to go for what you can get. A photo is generally speaking better than no photo, because if you have a photo, there's always a chance it can turn out and be either a good photo or at least a fun one. But just try to imagine if next time you're out, I'm assuming you know these people, and if so, next time you're out with them, if you get a chance to be in a situation like this and walk in front of them, then you can turn around really quickly and get photos of them when they're horsing around or whatever. Next up, from Steve Boyce, we have a picture of a protest. Looks like, is that Chicago on the? Well, there's Chicago on the banner on the right side. I'm trying to figure out what city it is. Anyway, so we have a picture of a protester at a protest event, and so the motion blur in the flag, A-okay, because the protester's face is really well frozen, right? So the shutter speed here, I mean, if you imagine having a slightly faster shutter speed, this is probably, I'm going to guess, in the 1/125th to 1/250th range, probably on the faster side of that. And if you can imagine cranking down the shutter speed to 1/1000th or something like that, then you would have gotten the flag frozen, or even faster than that. But the most important part of this photo is the person's face. And then, so you got that frozen, and that's good. Then beyond that, the composition, there's some things really working well here. The person and the flag are entirely in frame. Okay. You've got the person's interaction with the city, which is also really good because you've got the surroundings there. So that's working really well. And then the other thing, I kind of like a funny thing, is you've got the flag blocking the sign that says "Do not block." So anyway, and the other thing is, by and large, there's a little bit of a crookedness here, but your verticals are pretty well vertical. If you look at the one on the right, it's perfectly vertical. The downside to that is that the one on the left is a little bit crooked, but it's not the important vertical because it's broken up by the flag, and it's the buildings are different shapes. So I wouldn't consider that an issue with this photo. But realistically, you've done a lot of things here that are really working well, and I think this is a good shot that fulfills the prompt. From Harrison Fisher, we have a photo of an incoming train. And trains also, always a good subject for action shots. So here in Colorado, there's a very active train photography community. And I do follow a bunch of them on Instagram, and I look at them, I'm like, I've been there. It's fun to see places that I've been and take photos of the same trains I see people taking photos of. This, judging by the weather and the train engine style, I'm going to guess this is England. Sorry, let me be more accurate. I'm going to guess this is somewhere in the UK. Oh, hey, look at that. There's a British pounds for the fine. I didn't even notice that. Okay. Anyway, so there are some things really going on very well here. The instinct to get the photo of the train coming at the camera is good, and that's the way you want to have it be. The setting is fine. Train photography, yes, there are places in the world where trains go through exceedingly scenic areas. By and large, they don't. So with train photography, capturing the train in the setting it's in is perfect. So there are two things going on here that I would say, let's see if we had the ability to try this again. One of them is the train is a little bit blurry. And I'm not sure what's going on with the center of this image. It looks like, I can't tell if it's that the train has like steam, that it looks like there's a cloud of steam in front of the train, which is kind of weird. And I'm not sure if that's an issue with the film or if that's actually something that's happening with the train. At any rate, that's so if there were a way to get that out of the photo so that the train were in sharper relief, that would really work well. The other thing is waiting, say I don't know how fast this train's going. Let's say it's coming along at a nice clip. And if you waited 3 to 5 seconds for the shot and you tracked the train as it panned toward you, then the signs that are on the right now, they're a distracting element because of the text, because the signs, the text on the signs isn't the point of the image. But if you tracked that train as it came up to you and took a photo of it when it was a bit closer and with the signs out of frame, that would make the engine, the locomotive, which is generally the most exciting part of the train, much more of the focus of the photo. Just remember, as always with all train photography, be safe, be a safe distance back. If I recall correctly, do I recall correctly, Harrison, that you submitted a photo of a train last year and mentioned that you have train safety education? I forget if that was you or someone else. Anyway, as a general rule for everybody who's interested in photographing trains, stay safe, stay far away from the tracks. At least in the US with the diesel electrics we do here, you can't hear the train coming until it's 6 seconds from hitting you. If you're looking away from it because of how quiet they are. I know it sounds weird to say trains are quiet. They are very quiet. So just remember that whenever you're out, anyone who's out taking train photos, keep the end, you can have the train in the setting and have it be a smaller element if the setting really contributes to the image, or if it doesn't, like when I'm in downtown Denver photographing trains, I'm getting the whole engine in the frame if I can, because no one wants to see a graffiti-covered rusty bridge that the train is going underneath. So anyway, good instinct to go for a train for this type of photo. They do make captivating action photo subjects. From Alexa D, we have a photo here with a swan. With a swan taking off. So here's one of the things that is, one of the things right off the bat that you'll notice here is that the water is crooked, okay? So there's an interesting thing going on here. Yeah, the water's crooked, but if you look at the trees on the left, they're straight. So what this is telling you is a couple of things this is telling you. Oh, the other thing is the reeds and the cattails behind the swan are a bit crooked, but not quite as crooked as the water. So there are two things going on. One is that the camera is at a little bit of an angle, and the other one is that the water line is moving away from the camera. And what happens then is when you're photographing the world, it's a 3D space, and your image is a 2D space. So if you imagine that you're standing in a triangle, at one, in the middle of one of the lines of the triangle, and then you've got the 2 points that you can see, and the far line is angling away from you. Now, if you step back and you turn that triangle into a 2-dimensional subject, it's not going away from you anymore. It's now rotated. So it's not a flat triangle. It's like an upright triangle that's much shorter. And the reason for that is because the distance from point A to B on the long side now becomes height. And so if you have something that's say very flat and long, well, that doesn't have a lot of vertical height if you convert it to two-dimensional space. So that's a big part of what's happening here. Water lines are hard to photograph when they're going away from the photographer. So the best way to counteract that is, so for instance, this was taken with a 50 millimeter lens, which comes from Alexa's notes to me. And if you imagine this photo being taken with, say, a 135 or a 200 millimeter lens, then that would crop in on the swan. And then you would have the ability to rotate the photo a little bit more as needed to balance out the horizon line, and also then have the swan take up more of the frame. So that's just one thing to think about when you're looking at, if you're going to go out to, say, a nature preserve or wherever this type of place would be photographed, and you want to take a picture of a bird, and you're probably not going to get much closer than this, then having that slightly longer lens will help a great deal. Now, the things that are really going well in this photo, I do think, though, the use of shutter speed here, you can tell this is a very fast shutter. Look at the water. There's very little blur in the water. Some of the droplets have a little bit of a streak shape to them, but by and large, that water is frozen. So this is a 1/1000th-ish of a second shutter speed. This is very fast and a good way to freeze the motion of the bird. And that's a good, and also I think the general composition here, right, with the bird, if you imagine like zooming in on this bird just a little bit, even just twice as much, to where the bird, the splashes and the reeds and a little bit of the water take up the frame, then again, we have still a really good composition of the setting with the splashing and the action being frozen. So a lot of things here are going really well. This next shot comes from Stephen Boesky, and this is a photo of a traffic cop. And what's interesting about this shot, and we'll talk about this again in the honorable mentions with a different photo, is that the action is not actually happening in the photo. Like, you could say that, yes, there's a bit of action here because this cop is doing something active, and honestly, being a traffic cop never really appealed to me as like a fun or safe job. I'm not gonna lie, like, I could be wrong on that, but yeah, even with a reflector, I'm not sure that I'd want to get out in traffic, especially not here in Denver. Anyway, all that aside, like, from a technical perspective, this photo rather, like, hits that out of the park. So the focus is spot on. The depth of field is absolutely perfect. You can look at the gravel in front of the traffic cop, right? You can see she's in focus, and then the background behind her is blurry, and it's looking like the lens is stopped down, maybe a stop at most, probably only half of a stop, and then the depth of field, you can tell by the pavement texture, where it transitions from blurry to focused back to blurry right behind her. Like, she is in the middle of the plane of sharpest focus. So her fingertips are in focus. The back of her ears and her hair behind her ears are in focus. Like, this is how focus should be done when taking a picture, especially of a person. So really exceptional way of having subject isolation and of showing that there is action going on in the scene, even if not freezing a specific super active action by the traffic cop. So there's a lot of things to look at in this photo as being done exceptionally well and as best practices for the way that a good capture should be pursued. From Robert Thompson, we have an action shot of a person on a bike going past a car window. So good use of blurring the action here, because the act of blurring right here makes the person on the bike seem like they could be going by at a crawl, right? For all we know. But because of the blur, it makes it feel like they're going really quickly. And also because this was almost certain, well, was it taken at night? I want to say it was taken at night, but I can't tell if that's the sun or a street light reflecting in the mirror of the car. But anyway, This is a nice tight crop also of the person who's riding the bike. The only distracting elements in here are the text on the truck in the background. And then the mirror is so bright, and the glare off of it, that that bright area ends up drawing the viewer's eyes toward it. So if you imagine a quick edit on this photo where the mirror area here, especially the brightest part of the mirror, were masked out a little bit. The brightness was drawn back a bit, not enough so that it looks fake, because then it would draw attention for being too dark. But if you could dial the brightness back a little bit, then it would not be this really bright blob off to the side of the photo that is in sharp focus and very bright and drawing our eyes to it. So other than that, like you've got the camera aligned properly, and the exposure is pretty darn close to spot on. And this would be a very tough scene to get a quick exposure with. So those technical elements are done really well. From BlueMoonKissLove, we have an action shot of, I'm not 100% certain. My best guess, since this is a night photo, we have a, you can tell by the street lights in the sky, right? This was definitely taken well after dark. My best guess is that those lines going through the darkness are the lights on a bus or a truck. And so the action portion of this is capturing the motion of those lights as they went through the frame. But I'm not 100% certain that's the case. Is it a good photo? I enjoy the composition, and I think the use of darkness and lightness and contrast in this are really well done. So I think there's a lot to really enjoy about this photo in its own right, but I'm having trouble discerning what the action element in it is. Next up, from Joshua Gaude, is another train photo, and there's some really interesting things going on here. So first, let's pick apart one of the things that, if it were possible to change this, which I know it's not, the flagpole right in the middle, really distracting. Other than that, what we talked about with the last train photo is, the engine was a little bit blurry, and then the signs, because they were so close, were a bit distracting. Here, the sign, I'm not sure. I might clone that out if it were me. I'm not sure if that bothers me or not right now. But seeing the train in the setting here like it is does really work, because you've got the train. It's nice and sharp. It's the rest of the photo, by the way, deep depth of field. The trees are in focus. The grass is in focus. So it's, because everything is in focus, that's kind of what we would expect from what this photo is setting up. And also, one of the things that's really nice about the way that this train is captured is that it's coming around a bend. So in a lot of train photos, whether it's in calendars or the best work that a lot of train photographers do — I do not count myself in this class of train photographer, by the way — you'll notice that the trains are coming around bends. And they're either like this shape, which would be like a convex bend, or a concave where it goes away from the photographer. And the reason is that when the train is coming around a bend, you end up with a photo where you can get the front of the engine as well as the side, and you get a nice profile of any of the other engines. Like, we can tell from this, there are 3 engines on this train. And so you can see all 3 of them. You can see the front of it, and then you can make out the windows of the rear engine as well. And so you have a nice capture then of all of the engines. So really nice execution in general of the train in action photo right here. Next up, we have our second hockey photo from Joseph Schallmo, and we have, is this the same game? Or are these the same teams? I can't tell. Same colors, anyway. At any rate, so we have a like really close, up close photo of this game. Honestly, have no issues with this photo. I think this is really well executed, and I think it's a really good way of executing an action photo in a setting like this. This could have been an honorable mention, came down to effectively a coin flip. This was this is a really, really strong photo and a really good execution of taking a photo at a hockey game or any sort of indoor sport. And so one of the reasons that this works really well, let's go over the reasons why I say that and why this works really well, but more than just saying this is a good example of it. You have, like, everything is aligned. The verticals are vertical. And in photography, if your vertical lines are vertical, there is a whole lot of forgiveness you can get with your horizontals being slightly off, because the human brain is used to perceiving horizontals as being disappearing or converging lines. And so, yeah, the horizontals angle, but that gives us a sense of depth with this photo. The other thing that's really going well, or the next thing, is that his face is in focus. Like, his face is the point of focus, which is what should be in focus. And you can see his expression there. He is himself focused, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to get that puck into the goal. And then the other thing is the way that this is composed. We have this large negative space over on the left. That's where he's about to skate. So the structure of this image is giving this hockey player a place to go to within the photo. And that's a really good way to structure any kind of motion-based photo, because then it allows the viewer's mind to sort of track the future action that took place right after the photo was taken. Next up, from Jaeyon Lee, we have a photo which is looking like the start of a roll of film. So we have a blurry photo of a person carrying a bag and walking through a crosswalk or on a sidewalk. Looks like a bit of a happy accident photo, if I'm honest, because of the light leak and the felt imprint on the left side, which tells us this was, in all probability, the first photo on the frame. I'm sorry, on the roll rather. I have no issue with blur and misfocus being used in photos, as long as it is clear that there is a reason for that. And is it this video or one of the others, I forget which, we'll talk about that. One of the photos of two hands reaching for the same thing, and we'll talk about that exact same thing with that photo. What I'm struggling with here is what is the missed focus doing for the image? Like, it should be intentional, and I'm just not sure why that is. There is nothing wrong with avant-garde photography. There's nothing wrong with the lo-fi, lomographic, photographic look. In fact, I think that can be really successful all the time. It just has to convey that it was done intentionally. Okay, and so with that, we will now go into the honorable mentions. And you know what? We're just going to start off with the photo I just talked about with the two hands from, from Andre Jelakovic. That is as close as my Midwestern accent is going to let me get. Okay, so here we have a photo where the blur was clearly intentional. Don't tell me otherwise, Andre. And so the reason that I would say that this was intentional, and the reason this gets an honorable mention, is that this isn't just an action shot. This is like a big anticipation shot. Okay, so the focus point being beyond the hands intentionally forces the viewer to look at the hands, because they are blocking our eyes from what is in focus. And that emphasizes that the hands are the important thing in the photo. And then what is it that they're doing? They're both reaching for the same pen cap. And as we've seen in many, many movies, their fingers are going to touch, and then they will fall in love and live happily ever after. And so the action here is these two hands coming together. It's also the promise of a future action. And so I'm going to argue that the use of focus in here really emphasizes that those two hands are what we should look at. And yeah, I think this is a great execution of the prompt for that reason. Next up, from Frank Wooters, we have a photo of somebody who is a about to have a different kind of action. So I looked at this and I mean, my first reaction was to smile and then chuckle, because this is a very clever execution of a photograph in general. I thought that this, one of the things you will have heard me talk about in many different videos is that photos should tell a story. We saw that in the last photo that we talked about, told a story. We see this in this photo. It tells a story, and it's one that probably can't relate as readily as the last photo due to the family-friendly nature of this channel. Anyway, so this is a clever and fun way to do it, and I thought this was also, from a technical perspective, really well executed. Nice shallow depth of field to isolate the print on the toilet paper, the texture of the cardboard and the texture of the tube holder, and the hand is in focus. And then right behind all of that, the tile wall, slightly out of focus. Like we talked about this a little bit with the traffic cop photo. Subject isolation and use of depth of field here is executed exceptionally well. Our last photo in the action category comes from Francesco Coppola. And we have a photo of a model, assume it's a model, jumping on a bed. And one of the reasons I really like this is you've got her face pretty darn close to frozen. Okay, and I'm going to guess that this is clearly a very high ISO film, because this is an indoor setting, even though it's all white and it's very high grain. And I do think the grain here, we'll talk about this with the rest of Francesco's photos throughout the course of these videos, really complements the subject very nicely. So her face is as close to frozen as you're going to get. And I have no complaints about that at all. And then her hands are blurry. Her feet are blurry. And then her torso is kind of like halfway blurry between where her hands and feet are. And so that conveys like the frozen motion of her, as well as the motion that is imparted in this jump that she's in the middle of. So really well executed take on this type of photo. The other thing I think is really neat, if you imagine this photo with a white headboard on the back of the bed, I don't know that it would have made it here, because that dark headboard tells us that the bed is underneath. Like we can kind of make out the sheets a little bit. There's a little texture to them versus the plain white wall. But that headboard is really what is making this photo, because in addition to the way that the model is captured, it tells us that she's jumping on a bed. And this is a photo that I'm going to hazard a guess that the vast majority of us have attempted to do at some point or another. So really good execution on this type of photo. Our runner-up in this category, there are two people now who are just like biting their nails. Our runner-up comes from Casey Schmidt with a really captivating photo of somebody rappelling down a wall. At least I really hope that's a person rappelling and not like a museum exhibit. I hope I did not. It's kind of hard to tell because there are like some lights, like a recessed light up above. But we're going to go with the benefit of the doubt that this is a person rappelling down a wall, captured mid-rappel. And if that's the case, then what we have here is really excellent use of placement, looking up at the action, and also really incredible access to the action, because this is a very up-close photo to this subject. So then there's also a really good use of lighting. The vignette from the scene lighting, which is a couple of 2 or 3 spotlights up at the top of the wall, creates a natural barrier to the rest of the photo so that our eyes are focused on exactly what the subject is, the guy who's rappelling down the wall. So really exceptionally good execution of this type of photo and this prompt, which takes us to our category winner, the coveted Golden Neener for the action class. And this comes from the action group. And this comes from Clay Williams. And this is the most actiony photo that came in. Really exceptionally good execution of this prompt. My quibbles with this would be like, would it be nice to have the entire boat in frame? Sure. Other than that, like, would it be nice to have the boat be 100 yards closer to the camera? Sure. But like, realistically, the things that are done right here, it's still close enough that you can see the action. You can see this guy straddling what is to us the left side of the catamaran, and then 2 or 3 people on the other side keeping it from cantilevering over, as it looks it's probably making a sharp turn right here. I'm going to guess that 15 seconds from now, that after this photo was taken, maybe less, the catamaran was angled. Looks like it's doing a turn right here, and the photo may not have turned out as well when it was closer to the photographer, because that guy on our left could have been blocked by the sail. So, and of course, then also you've got a lot of the things going really well here in terms of the action is frozen, the spray from it is frozen. And if you look at the spray on you have this sort of like crest, which shows the way that the wind is coming off or the air is coming off the back of the boat. That spray captures the drag pattern of the boat as it moves through the air. Really unbelievably cool execution of the action shot. So, yeah, well done, Clay. This was a good photo. And with that, that is everything for the action category. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk about the next category, which is going to be architecture.